Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
The top 5 bad gym habits of sport climbers. Originally here at the Power Company, we didn't often talk about the differences between climbers who choose to mostly climb routes and those who choose boulders. I'll go ahead and call that neglectful on my part because there are some fundamental things that are different about the two. We'll talk more about those differences in a later post, but for now, I want to focus on a difference that wasn't obvious at first. The fact that while in the gym, for the most part, boulderers are closer than sport climbers to training the correct way. Since many people have a tendency to automatically jump to extremes to discount everything they read, let me note here that I said, for the most part. You boulderers aren't off the hook. To paraphrase several readers of Jamie Emerson's now defunct but excellent site, B3 Bouldering, why 5? Why not 10? Why not 20? And to paraphrase Jamie's answer, because it's my book and my list. Any more questions? Okay then, on with the show. Number 5, going climbing. Let me start by saying this. If you go to the gym just to have fun with no desire to improve, then you should go and do exactly that. You should climb. Do whatever you want. Treat it the same way you do when you go outside. Just climb. If you want to improve, however, you should definitely not go to the gym to just go climbing. If your goal is to treat the gym as training for climbing, then you'll have to structure it differently than you do your outdoor sessions. If your normal routine is to warm up, sample a few climbs, see how the project feels today, and then do 3 laps on the same 510, stop. Do something different. Anything. Spend the night working on a project. Spend it on vertical top ropes instead of leading the roof again. Go bouldering. And whatever you're doing, try hard. Learn something and take note of what you learned. This doesn't have to be an endless treadmill. If you do it right, it could get you somewhere. Number 4, staying in their strengths. When I look around the climbing gym, it's always the same people on the same angles. The crimp masters post up at the near vertical walls. The compression junkies find all the biggest slopers and stake out the arêtes. Those opposed to footwork are campusing up the steeps. It never fails. Hooray! You did another 45-degree V9 sloper rig. Good job. But why do you keep telling people that the 15-degree techie balance problem is awkward and stupid? Because you suck at it, that's why. Which is precisely why you should be doing it. It's true. Your hardest outdoor sins will likely be the ones that will suit your strengths. However, the level of return you'll get on climbing solely at a particular angle or always on a particular group will diminish rapidly. Paying closer attention to your weaknesses will make you a better climber. No question. And what happens when your ultimate compression project ends with a run-out, techie head wall? You'll wish you had spent more time on those awkward, stupid problems. Number 3, counting pitches, discounting quality. Often when I ask sport climbers how their session was, I get an answer that details the number of pitches they climbed on, as if they're in direct competition with Alex Honnold or they're training for 24 hours of horseshoe hell. There's no mention of how hard they were trying, whether they learned anything new, or if they made progress on something. Only a confirmation that they reached their arbitrary number of scheduled pitches for the session. Again, let me say this. If your goal in climbing is to get in a predetermined number of pitches each time you climb, and that's enough to make you happy, then by all means, keep doing it. I wish my goals were as simple to achieve. I envy you. Seriously. However, if you want to improve at rock climbing, then somewhere along the line you got bamboozled into believing that a certain number of pitches is directly related to getting better. It isn't. Well, that isn't entirely true. Sometimes it is directly related. When you're a beginner or new to sport climbing, then it may very well be to your benefit to get in lots of pitches. If it's early in the season and you're getting your route legs back under you, I'll give you a pass. But if it happens every week, your pass is revoked. Instead of concerning yourself with the number of pitches, try paying attention to the quality of the pitches and the quality of the rest between pitches. If you're cramming 24 pitches into a 3-hour session, it's likely that you aren't rested well enough to give 100% physically, mentally, or emotionally to your performance on 23 of those pitches. If the desire is to improve, I would rather see someone give 3 high-quality attempts at a hard project or a climb that exploits their weaknesses than send 15 pitches at the same grade they've been climbing for the past 5 years. Quality, not quantity. Number 2, take. While I used to be a staunch traditionalist, I now see the truth. There's a time and a place for saying take and sitting on the rope, while working out moves, while warming up, for actual safety reasons. There's also a time and place when take should be completely removed from your vocabulary, while in red point mode, while on-sighting or flashing, while training. If you're on a rope for training, it's likely that you're doing one of 2 things: a low-intensity endurance workout in which you should never get near the point of failure, or a workout that requires reaching failure at a specific point to affect adaptation. In either case, unless for safety reasons, the word take has little place. The gym isn't only a training ground for the physical aspects of climbing. For many of us, the gym is an important place to hone our mental and emotional skills. Learning to go for it in the gym can make for much more productive days outside. For the many of you who find that several days are spent on your project just convincing yourself to make the next move or clip, cultivating this skill while training can dramatically speed up the process. Use take when appropriate, but when you've assessed the risks and you're ready to go hard, forget the word entirely. And the number 1 bad gym habit of sport climbers? Ignoring bouldering. I used to be you. I trained solely on routes. I mean, I wasn't a boulderer, so why waste my time bouldering? Essentially, routes are a bunch of boulders all stacked on top of each other. Sometimes those boulders are stacked in your favor, sometimes they aren't. In every case, sending depends on how efficiently, if at all, you can do the moves. It all comes down to strength and power. If the hardest moves on a route are at your utmost limit, it's unlikely that you'll send. And the best way to get better at harder moves is to try them bouldering. You can absolutely work on difficult moves on a rope. However, even if you've mastered the art of trying 100% despite the fall potential, you've climbed a number of moves just to get there. You'll use energy to pull back up the rope. It takes more effort. It takes more time. Stop wasting time and energy and work on hard moves right on the ground. There's no better way to get stronger. I've heard many sport climbers claim that they've never been shut down by a move, so there's no reason to train bouldering. Actually, I've said that myself. Either you're abnormally strong or you aren't trying routes that are difficult enough. I'd guess the latter. Even if you've never encountered a move that you can't do, gaining more power will make all those moves seem easier. You'll be less depleted for that last move showdown, or you'll have more left for the pump fest following that first bolt nerd gate. More power can't hurt. Less power certainly can.
Okay, so Nadya Suntay, I'm one of the climbing coaches. I'm really excited to be part of the crew. I love working with everyone at Power Company. Everyone's great. All the coaches are great. We have a great support system. So
we love having you. So.
Really, it's really awesome being part of the crew. But I've been climbing for over 10 years. Started pretty casually in the gym. The first probably 5 years, I was going to the red, but not very consistently, here and there. But probably the last 7 or 8 years, been very consistent, been getting outside, in the spring and fall, and even in the summer sometimes. But yeah, I've been way more consistent, have been more focused on training, not just climbing on ropes, been definitely bouldering more. But yeah, so I've been climbing for a while. Been out there. A lot of people probably have seen me at the crag.
Yeah, and I would add to that that not only had they seen you, but I think you're a noticeable person at the crag because you try really hard, you carry yourself like an athlete, and
Mhm.
I think that's a thing that has really kind of come into its own in climbing in the last few years. When I first started climbing, there weren't a lot of women, and it wasn't super accepted for women to look like athletes, carry themselves
Mhm.
like athletes. Not that it
Mhm.
wasn't accepted, but it just wasn't the thing people did. So
Mhm.
you are an athlete. You carry yourself like an athlete, and
Well, thank you.
and I think that's, I mean, admirable. I notice when there are women at the crag who look strong. I'm like, hell
Mm.
yes, I love seeing it.
Well, I wouldn't call myself like super strong, I'm okay, but not, there's definitely a lot of really, really strong women climbers and I look up to them. But
Sure.
I definitely, I definitely feel like I at least try really hard. If I have anything going for me is I always give it 100%. People probably heard me yelling a lot because that's one
Yeah.
thing that I do like. I find that I can tap into that, and I
Yeah.
do try really hard.
Yeah. I think that's such a great skill to have. And you're more of a sport climber, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Was there something about this chapter in particular that you relate to as a sport climber?
hmm I think that I've probably have made all of the mistakes that are
Oh
in the
yeah.
chapter.
Yeah. In
Like,
fact, I think the only one that's not a personal mistake for me is the counting pitches. All the other ones are
mhm.
me. The counting pitches is just something that I just started noticing a lot.
Right. So I feel like I can relate to all of the habits that, I mean, we've all sort of been there and we've all had to break them in a way in order to get better. So I think that's why it was, and I do sport climb a lot more. So I felt like this chapter was more relatable.
Yeah.
So, and um, one of the main ones that I thought for me, especially, and it's still a habit that I work on breaking all the time, is saying take, right?
Mm,
Like, I feel like I use that a lot. I mean, I take a lot, but I think it's also depends on the situation. Like you wrote, like there are times when it's okay to say take, like when you're working a
yeah.
project it's okay because you are scared and you are trying different moves, so that's okay. But I definitely find myself that I need to break that habit more, and like reading through this chapter I'm like, yeah, that's one that I need to work on more as well.
Yeah, it's good to hear that, you as a coach, as an experienced sport climber, can read that thing that seems so simple on the surface and say, shit, this is something I need to actually pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was reading back all these chapters, recording all these chapters, there were multiple times where I was like, damn it, I wish I had reread what I wrote, a month ago,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's all really simple, but which maybe is what makes it so easy to overlook and forget
Mm-hmm.
about. With the word take, when are the times you're using it that you feel like you could get rid of it?
I think there are times when I'm on, like, what probably when I'm trying to on-site something and I
Mm,
I fall into that trap of maybe getting scared because I do get a little bit more scared, I think, than a lot of people. And um, so I find that when I'm trying, especially new climbs, I tend to overuse that word,
sure.
unfortunately. And I wish I didn't have to, but I find that I just get very scared. And for me, that's one of my weaknesses in climbing is I get very scared when I'm climbing. I'm scared of falling. And it's something I have to work on every day. And
Sure.
yeah, it gets better with every season, right? Like, we get stronger, we gain more confidence in our climbing ability, but that's still one of the things that I have to work through all the time. So,
Yeah, on-sighting is like, if you look at the red point process, it starts at like going bolt to bolt or whatever, or depending on the difficulty of the climb. And on-sighting is this kind of thing by itself down there at the bottom, one attempt. That's really all you get.
yep.
And it requires you to make this mindset shift on the ground. And it's tough to make it there, especially when you're a red point climber who has learned kind of your process.
Yep.
And it takes me this many tries to get comfortable, to get over the fear, to be willing to go for it above this bolt or whatever that is. So it's really easy to fall back into that normal pattern that you get into when you're working on something, and
For sure that, and I fall in. Yep, I fall into that trap, unfortunately. But it's just like you said. There's just like that comfort zone, and like you get used to something, and yeah, you have to break that trap sometimes. But it's hard. It's hard to do that. You have to commit to doing that for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really common one, is overusing the word take. And it's definitely a valid word. You should be using it. It's more efficient to use it sometimes,
Right.
but then you should also start to recognize when it's no longer being helpful and try to weed it out of that part of your process. So I'm glad you said I have to work on it every day.
Yeah, I do.
I mean,
I'm gonna work on it this weekend when I go climbing.
You're like, but Chris said,
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you I mean, we've all been kind of out of commercial gyms for the most part for a while. But the idea of going into the gym and going climbing and just treating your day like you treat a day outside is something I used to see so often at RockQuest. In the gym, people would just come in and act like it was a climbing day and then not understand why they weren't getting better. And I saw that, I mean, for years, the same people would do it and not understand. And I think that's a really big issue too. If you're not improving with your routine, how it is, you have to change the damn thing or it's not going to make a difference.
Right. No, for sure. And kind of going, into like people ignoring the bouldering, right? They go into the gym and they're always getting on ropes. But personally, I've stopped rope climbing in the gym. Like I don't rope climb anymore because it doesn't make me a better climber.
Right.
Like I need to work on power. I need to work on my weaknesses. And I find that bouldering is the best way to prepare for sport climbing.
Yeah. I mean, you handle a lot of our proven plans, and in our proven plan system, when you're a low 512 climber or somebody breaking into the 512s, I'm still recommending that people get on a rope in the gym sometimes, because I think there's still a lot of value there to learn, the psychology of climbing on a rope, to learn your red point process, to learn how to go for it above a bolt. But then once you're climbing like at the mid 12 and up level, there's almost no reason to get on a rope anymore in the gym. And we regularly have people say, well, you've got this 512 program for ropes. How come there's not a 513 program for ropes? I want to climb on ropes in the gym. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't need to. They're like, but I want to. And I'm like, that's why you shouldn't, because you want to keep doing the same thing.
Right. And then you see those maybe 512 climbers, they're not improving. They're getting on the same thing in the gym. And yes, maybe they're doing great on those 512s, but they're not improving. They're staying at the same level for years.
Yeah.
So
It's a trap.
yeah, definitely.
Were you ever a pitch counter?
No, I don't recall. I always like to push myself in the gym. I wasn't like, oh, I have to get this many pitches in. No, I
It
that's one
always
yeah.
it always baffled me, like driving home from the red, when people would be like, "Oh, well, I got my 10 pitches in today." I'm like, "What? Excuse me? Was there a
Mhm.
quota? I didn't get the memo. Was I
Yeah.
supposed to get 5 more pitches in? I don't know."
Mhm.
And it's always the people who are stuck somewhere, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I can't get past this grade, so I have to do this number of pitches to make up for it or something."
Mhm.
It's such a weird, it doesn't compute, the math doesn't add
Right.
up, but so
Mhm.
many people get stuck in it. You have to do this many
Mhm.
pitches.
Yeah,
I
they
never
need to start
understood it.
climbing at the new.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Um, yeah, and like I wanted to kind of bring up like, people when people are staying in their strengths.
Mm,
It's not even necessarily physical strengths. Like
yeah.
a lot of times we need to work on the mental weaknesses just as much as the physical weaknesses,
Yeah.
I
Mental,
think.
emotional,
Mhm.
all of the things surrounding whatever that thing is that you're not getting on. There's a reason you're not getting on it. What is that
Exactly.
reason?
Yeah. Like I'll use myself as an example. This past weekend, I got on something at the new and I almost gave up at the second bolt because I was terrified. I was just like, no. Like I was just looking at the bolts. I'm like, no, I can't do this. Like, what am I doing? Like, what? Why am I climbing right now? But then I'm like, okay, like, relax. It's okay. You're not gonna die.
Yeah.
And you just get through it. So I think it's good working on those weaknesses because you have to really reel it in and be like, okay, like do you want to get better or not? If you want to get better, you have to push through this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important. You have to push through this. It doesn't mean, oh, tomorrow I need to just not be scared anymore.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. You can't jump from this step in your process all the way to the outcome that you're looking for. You have to move through that space that's scaring you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like with Annalisa, she's a timid leader at first. She hates on-sighting, refuses.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't like terrain that she hasn't explored before. She would rather top rope first and then bolt to bolt and then bolt to bolt and then bolt to bolt and then bolt to bolt
Mm-hmm.
until she's ready to start linking things.
Yeah.
And what we've talked about a lot is just, let's take a little baby step at a time. The next day
Mm-hmm.
out or the next project that we work on, let's try to speed that process up just a little bit. So normally you would top rope it first. Let's
Yeah.
go up it with a stick clip, bolt to bolt first. You're
Mm-hmm.
still getting to top rope, but it's a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe where you would bolt to bolt it 4 times before you're willing to try to connect bolts and feel like you might fall. Let's only do it 3 times,
Mm-hmm.
and try to take those little baby steps to speed up that process. Because all of these, the emotional things, the mental things, the technical things, all of this are things that we need to work on. We need to add
Right.
together.
And the gym is a great place also to work through some of those things,
Yeah.
right? Like you don't want to get outside and then have to do this whole process, especially if you don't have a ton of weekends, right? A lot of people only get out on the weekends. So the gym is a great place to work on all of these things
Yep.
and work through that process. And then when you get outside, you have to waste less time,
Exactly.
figuring out like, what are my tactics? Like, am I going to top rope this first or what am I going to do? So, the gym is great for that.
Yeah, and it should be used that way.
Mhm.
So many people don't use it that way, but it
Mhm.
absolutely should, particularly if you have limited time outside.
Yes, definitely. I agree.
Totally off topic, but I'm curious now that you've said this and you've talked about you getting scared like at the second bolt. And I know so many climbing couples go through this, and you mostly climb with your husband, I think, Brian,
Yep.
and
Mostly.
who is a really good climber in his own right.
Yes.
And I'm curious how Brian deals with that. Like, how do you two as a couple work through those moments when you're at the second bolt scared? He knows you can do it, and he's trying to let you know that you can do it. How does that look?
I think this season has tested our relationship probably more than any other season. Just because we've been, going to the New River Gorge instead of the Red a little bit more.
Right.
And
is that scarier for you?
Yeah, it's very scary.
Yeah.
The balls are not always clean. You're climbing sideways from your bolt. There's a lot of pendulum fall potential. You're just, it's just very heady. And I've, there's been many weekends where I've broken down, and I'm like,
Sure.
Brian, like, I need you, like, I need more patience. Like, I know he's trying to help, but a lot of times what he, like, the things that he says in my mind, it's criticism, it's over coaching.
Right.
And, I break down sometimes. I'm like, Brian, just let me, like, maybe just don't say anything. Just let me figure it out. Like, less talking. let me just get into my own head and let me figure this out. It's tough. It's been hard. But on that particular route where I almost gave up, he was actually very patient. He would just let me calm down.
Good.
And, he's definitely really good about being patient with me. And because he knows how scared I am. So.
Yeah. I am not good at it either. I've worked on it. I've gotten better at it, but I am not super patient when it comes to climbing. And Annalisa and I have struggled with it at times, I think we found an okay balance, but she still has to remind me, like, I need you to just be patient with me right now,
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but fine, it's hard. Tricky.
Yeah, but I think that both you and Brian, you don't get as scared, right? There's just and I tell Brian this, like, you might be scared, right? Like, I'm sure he is scared to a degree, but I'm like, you don't understand my level of scared. You just don't get it. So, like, I need you to just be patient, talk less, just be there for me. Right.
So. Yeah, well, I think that's perfect advice for him, for me, for a lot of the partners listening, because it's a real thing, and frankly, it's not in this chapter, but I do think that's a bad habit of belayers for sport climbers, particularly when they're couples, is to not be patient, to not realize that the emotional state that the climber is in at that moment is so heightened, so intense, that anything you say adds to that tension, and it might just be too much. So there have been a lot of times where I say something positive and Annalisa's like, don't fucking tell me what I can do. And I'm like, oh my God, I was being positive. But what I don't realize is that she's just in such a tense place, and my voice elicits this emotional reaction that takes her over the top. So I should just shut up would be the better response.
Same with Brian. He'll tell me positive things, but in my mind, it registers completely different. It's like I'm hearing completely different words.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
And like you said, it's because we're just in such an emotional state because we're trying to push ourselves too, and we're hearing completely different things. So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
It's a tough thing, and I'm glad that this came up because I think it's one of the toughest things to get past, and I don't mention it in the book at all. So
yeah, well, that's all right. Next book.
Tell Brian we weren't trying to throw him under the bus here.
No.
Or just don't tell him anything and let him listen to the episode.
Yeah. No, he knows. We've talked about it a lot this season, so he knows.
We'll have to get you both on, and you and Brian and Annalisa and I can all talk through it. That would be a fun conversation.
Be fun, yeah. Just to hear different points of view, right?
Yeah, and see if Brian and I can exercise our shutting up.
Yeah.
Actually in the moment. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out to talk with me, and in the future, I think hopefully, whenever we're in the same town together, people will hear more from you on here.
Yeah, definitely. That would be awesome.
Tomorrow, the top 5 bad gym habits of boulders. We don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
This time,